Dr. Doom enters the MCU. Robert Downey Jr. returns to the MCU, but as the same person? Special effects. That's right. Robert Downey Jr. was just announced at SDCC that he will be returning to the MCU, but this time as Victor Von Doom, otherwise known as Dr. Doom. And if you can hear that, that is the sound of a million confused geeks trying to figure out what truly is going on. Because nothing, and I mean nothing, will ever be the same as Marvel pivots so very hard away from Kang into the warm, loving embrace of its very first star. But it begs several questions. One is, was this the only way Marvel could have gone? And the other one is what does it mean for the future of the MCU? Well, come with me, true believer, and let's answer some of these questions. So first and foremost, welcome to the Lapsed Geek Podcast. This is brought to you by Comic Geekdom. I am Doc John. I am your intrepid host through the quagmire that is geek culture. And if you like the content, if you like what you see, go down there, hit the like, hit the subscribe. Put on your notifications so that whenever we drop one of these things, you get to see it. And just so we can see more of each other. Don't tell my wife. Look us up on Facebook, also at Comic Geekdom, and also on Instagram and on Threads, also at Comic Geekdom. But you know what? You don't even have to subscribe right now because I'm going to win over your subscription. I'm going to win your like because you're going to love what we have for you. Okay? But before we can discuss RDJ, and where we're going in the future of the Marvel Universe, we got to discuss this little guy. Please don't erase me. That's right, Kang. Okay? And Kang here, right there, Toy Biz version. I'm so sorry. I have the Hasbro, but it just, he's still in the box. All right. Kang is a great comic book character. Okay? He's the master of time and manipulates time and his machinations and whatnot. But Kang in the MCU was pretty much dead on arrival. And this had very, very little to do with Jonathan Majors, the actor who played Kang. And I think he was really done a disservice by the writing and the production team, the whoever planned out this storyline. So Kevin Feige, you do great work, my friend, and you're awesome. Love you. But this was poorly planned straight from the beginning, and I don't know who was responsible. Obviously, I'd be interested to know. But they killed the character right from the start. Okay, and it began with He Who Remains, which was the tease for the character, and he showed up in Loki season 1. We're not going to belabor the point or anything like that. But while he was cryptic and hinted at certain things, the main point was, if you kill me, one of my variants, which is way worse than me, is going to show up. And a side character in Loki, who's also Loki, called Sylvie, kills him. So the next big bad for your film is killed by a side character in a TV show. Then, the next time we hear of the character, he shows up in Quantumania. And apparently for decades, I think in the timeline of the Marvel, it's like 60 years or so, roughly speaking, he's been in the quantum realm. This is now Kang. This is the variant we are now talking about. But he's been building an army for 60 years and was waiting for a beam from the surface after He Who Remains was killed. Maybe I'm missing something. Please hit me up in the comments. Tell me what I didn't get from that. But let's not think too deeply on it. Where this Kang, the variant most likely that was promised, is then defeated by Ant-Man. That's a way to go with a character. It's not the way that I would have gone, nor probably most other people. And it's just a thing that then, at At that point, what happens is that then a council of Kang shows up where there are hundreds or thousands of multiversal variants of Kang. And that is not what made Kang powerful in the comics or intimidating. It wasn't because there were 1,000 versions of Kang. That's kind of lame. What made Kang dangerous was because he was a master of time. So, for example, let's just spiffing here, riffing off an old Avengers story. For example, the Avengers defeated Kang once, and then what was great about the story, which was a really nice sort of twist, was that, like, let's say Ant-Man here, they, the quantum realm all get together and they defeat Kang. So, okay, not the strongest debut for your character, whatnot, but you could then twist it, which is what happened in the Avengers story, which is Kang, like, comes back 10 minutes later, and the heroes are still reeling from the events that just happened, the battle that they just had. But here's the thing, Kang, being a master of time, had spent the next 6 months preparing for the next encounter. He was replenished, his troops were replenished, everything was all set to go, and meanwhile, the Avengers had just gone through this battle. And this would have been a great thing for Quantumania. It would have been, okay, we defeated Kang, and then bam, he pops back up again and be like, yeah, let's go. And then they're forced to run away from him or something like that. And then you see his ability to manipulate time. You see his ability to, as a master of time, to get the advantage over his enemies. And that's simply not the way the character was presented. He was presented fairly lamely. And just to put this in perspective, can you imagine if Thanos had shown up at the end of the last Avengers movie? Okay, his minions had been defeated, right? Loki had been defeated, and so on and so forth. And he shows up, and suddenly Hawkeye kills him with an arrow through the eye. And he's like, okay, well, now my really tough variant's gonna show up. And that variant shows up in Guardians of the Galaxy, where he proceeds to get his butt whooped yet again. Would you have been intimidated by Thanos? Because Thanos was brilliantly brought into the MCU. His minions had been defeated, or people who were kind of working for him. Loki, but never his real minions, never his order, never the people under him. Loki was defeated, but Loki just worked for him. And Ronan was defeated, but Ronan only worked for him. He had never taken matters in his own hands. Thanos himself had never been defeated. And basically the first time we really see Thanos, he kicks the Hulk's butt, which is about the greatest way to introduce a character to show that he is intimidating, he is tough, and you fear for the characters every time Thanos is on screen because you're not really quite sure that they're going to survive. And that's brilliant. Kang had none of that. And it's not the actor's fault. It is completely the fault of the people writing the character. And that's unfortunately what we were left with. Now, just a note on Jonathan Majors, there were personal issues that also were probably the final nail in the coffin. I'm not going to get into that here. I have no interest in that. I don't really know about that. That's his own personal life. But unfortunately, it was probably the final nail, certainly in him portraying the character, and probably in the character itself. But let's ask the question, could you have recast Kang? Yes, absolutely. There are many actors, obviously, who probably could have taken the role and made it their own and pivoted away from sort of some of the things that were going on. But unfortunately, I think the writing had pretty much doomed the character anyway. Even if you changed it, it would have taken some miraculous bit of writing to get people to care. Because once people don't care about a character, once people don't fear it, they're not affected in any way by the character, then that character is dead. There's just no way to bring it back as a threat. And they did that with Kang. It was absolutely their fault. And this was probably a better way to go because unfortunately they had done such a piss poor job of writing the character. And it's a shame because Kang in the comics is cool. So that brings us to Robert Downey Jr. Okay. And his return to the MCU, which I think was anticipated by many, but certainly not in this capacity. And we have to ask the question, Was this the only choice? And we're going to answer that in two separate ways. One, the character itself, Doctor Doom, and second, as Robert Downey Jr. playing the character. Now, was Doom the only choice going forward here? In my opinion, yes. When you look at the Marvel Universe, there are very few really big bads that the public is aware of. Okay. And for me as an X-Men fan, for example, I was like, who could you possibly bring in to this? You know, you think people like Apocalypse and everything, but they did that terrible, terrible movie. And there was no way to bring in that. Plus, the X-Men haven't really been introduced in the MCU, and we'll probably mention that later. But the other major villains in the MCU, or in Marvel in general, are generally the better known ones are Spider-Man villains. And certainly none of them fit the bill in this case as anybody powerful enough. The other ones that would be powerful enough to produce this kind of threat would be somebody like Graviton. And, you know, nobody's like, ooh, Graviton. Now I'm scared. So Doom was great. You mentioned Doctor Doom, and even if people just have a passing thing to it, the mask, the look, it's all fantastic. And it was a great choice because it's instantly recognizable. People know who Doctor Doom is. So yes, I believe it was, roughly speaking, about the only real choice to move forward with this pivot. Now, the other question is that Robert Downey Jr., and should he be playing Doom? And he wasn't the only choice, okay? And I have to go into this with regards to Marvel and their use of the multiverse, because I have not been a huge fan of their casting. As an example of this, I'm going to bring up the Fantastic Four. And for example, in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, we got to see Reed Richards, and they had cast Krasinski in the role of Reed Richards, only to find, and so for many fans, the idea was, it's like, oh my God, that's it. He's going to be Reed, and the Fantastic Four movie is moving forward, and, you know, he's our Reed Richards. Only to find out that they cast Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four MCU movie that's coming out. And my geek brain doesn't like that. Because while it is multiversal and while there are different versions of the character, you kind of imagine that it's the same character. It's Reed Richards would be played by Krasinski, and he'd be played again. But yeah, okay, he's different in this multiverse for this or this reason, but he still looks the same. He's still the same guy, you know. It would be like me in a different multiverse would still be me, just richer, more eloquent, as opposed to the stud that you see before you in this universe. But I'd still look the same, pretty much, you see? And I'm not a fan of the idea that this is obviously a multiversal variant of Victor Von Doom. So this isn't the quote-unquote MCU Victor Von Doom as far as we know, because that wouldn't make any sense. How could Victor Von Doom from the MCU look exactly like Tony Stark and been running around, considering that Tony Stark is known worldwide and is probably one of the best known people in the entire world? So that doesn't make sense. It has to be a multiversal variant of Doom. And so are we going to get a Victor Von Doom down the line? Very possibly. And now that's going to be played, obviously not by Robert Downey Jr., but by a different actor. And they're both Victor Von Doom because of the multiverse. And I'm not a fan of that part. I would prefer that if this was supposed to be Doom, that it would be an actor that would be playing Doom. But I get it, because this casting, first and foremost, was for the casuals. And I got nothing against the casuals. You are welcome here. By the way, this is a safe space for everybody. Geeks, we are not gatekeepers here, okay? You are welcome here. And we need the casuals. We want the casuals. Because you guys are what pushes the movie to 2 billion. Okay, because we can't do it alone. And you don't believe me? You don't believe me? Because everything after Endgame, in general, was actually made for a relatively hardcore audience. Now, I think Marvel basically figured they had everybody hooked, and they kind of went for the hardcore. But unfortunately, the audience wasn't there. And again, if you don't believe me, take a look at some of the projects. WandaVision, Miss Marvel, Werewolf by Night, and even Hawkeye. Okay? WandaVision, where geeks freaked out. Oh my God, the kids are there. That's Wiccan, and that's Speed. Do you think any casual fan had any clue that that's what that was referencing? Of course not. So what got us excited about the show and what kept us watching about what might happen, a casual viewer had no tie to that. They had no idea that those characters are supposed to be young Avengers somewhere down the future line. And that's what I mean. That is meant for a hardcore audience. Even the nod to Quicksilver is a hardcore nod. Miss Marvel is a fan favorite through the comics. I actually was not reading comics at the time that she was introduced, and I just always heard friends raving about the character and how much they loved Miss Marvel. And I think that that was one of the reasons why they did the show. And the show was okay for me. I liked the early episodes. I think it fell apart for me when they left Jersey. I wasn't a fan of that part of the show. But overall, I thought it was okay. But that was for a hardcore relative fan base, and they were hoping that casuals would catch on to it, but it was hardcore. Werewolf by Night is completely hardcore. Nobody knows Werewolf by Night. Okay? No casual fan knows it. And even Hawkeye with Kate Bishop, although that is probably more mainstream than almost any of the other projects that I mentioned. The Marvels is definitely hardcore. You expected people to watch 3 different shows, at least, to kind of understand what was going on. There was no exposition given in the Marvels. If you hadn't watched, you kind of got who Kamala Khan was. You certainly had no idea who Rambeau was, and whether she was Photon, I guess we'll call her, because that's what she goes by, I believe, in the comics right now. So Photon, she didn't have powers the last time most people had seen her. And if you hadn't watched WandaVision, and the trick is that she walked through a magical barrier made by a witch, then you wouldn't have understood why suddenly she had abilities and she was switching out with Captain Marvel and with Miss Marvel. That's a big ask for a casual audience. And so Marvel, I think, gave it a shot. They figured everybody was kind of watching everything, and that's what hardcore people do. And that's not what happened. So they tried. And unfortunately, the audience wasn't there. And I think, if anything, I love geek culture, and I love that we're hardcore and we hyperanalyze everything like this. But unfortunately, you can't dive that deep all the time. You lose the people who aren't watching, reading, and haven't read comics for 40 years. And you can't cater to that tiny, tiny audience because it doesn't work. And I think the latest phase of Marvel, for the most part, has failed because of that, amongst other things. There was bad writing at times and whatnot. So it wasn't just that, but I do think that there was a more hardcore bent to this. Because in comics, we do tend to move on from times. And it's like, okay, well, let's, now we're going to pivot the storyline for a while. We're getting away from Captain America and Iron Man, and we're going to move over to War Machine. We're going to move over to Captain Marvel. We're going to tell the story of this. And comic book fans stick around and they check out. It's like, oh, yeah, cool. Oh, now Falcon is Captain America. That's great. This is going to be a totally different and new storyline. But for more casual viewers, it's not always that way. And we kind of forget that sometimes. So for casual fans, what is more associated with the MCU and their warm, joy feelings than RDJ? Okay, and that's why this kind of works. Okay, and I think that it may not be the greatest creative move on the planet, and there are problems that I have with the casting, but from a financial standpoint, you're looking at this movie, and when it was titled The Kang Dynasty, there was a good chance that this movie was going to possibly lose money. I don't think it would have. Still had Avengers on it, and I'm sure they would have brought out the tricks and they would have brought out the guns. But there was a chance that it was going to lose money. And now This easily makes over $1 billion the second you trot out RDJ, because the casuals fans are going to be like, oh my God, he's back. But wait, he's a villain. Oh my God. Whoa. What does this mean? And I think that it's still a business at the end of the day, and it's got to be successful so that we can get more movies. Because I am not going back to David Hasselhoff as Nick Fury. I lived through it. I did Generation X. I watched that S.H.I.E.L.D. show, the one episode that they bothered to come out. I'm not going back. Not after this. Okay? So whatever it takes to make money and to keep this train rolling, we're going to do it. And if that takes RDJ as Victor Von Doom, then so be it. You also have to remember that we are in the multiversal saga. Okay, that's what this is. Now, even though we brought in RDJ, even though we're doing him as Victor Von Doom, this is still the multiversal saga. And basically what has just happened here is they needed a character that could basically replace Kang. Okay, like you said, Kang's gone. It's not working. And so you needed a character that could pivot in and could basically take all the story points that you had planned for Kang and just, transfer them over. Possibly to this man, God Emperor Doom. Right? So that is most likely the plan. This is a multiversal variant of Victor Von Doom, not the MCU Victor Von Doom. And he is basically going to play ostensibly what Kang had been trying to do. And he'll just take over all the story points. Now, most of you might know or might have seen the picture rolling around, which was the Iron Man armor and just wearing the cloak of Doom, which was actually from Exiles number 23, I believe, where Iron Man had assumed the mantle of Dr. Doom. So he was actually Tony Stark, but now he was going by Doom. And that's not this. The Ultimate Universe right now has Dr. Doom, which is actually Reed Richards, who had been tortured by the Maker and forced to become Dr. Doom. And that's also a different thing. This one is, as far as we know, Robert Downey Jr. is playing Victor Von Doom, and most likely here, a multiversal variant of the character. Okay? So, I think this has gone on for too long, as it is, because we still have a couple more questions. But where does that leave us? Okay? You have to remember that in the two movies that they announced, which was Avengers Doomsday, more importantly, the next movie is Avengers Secret War. Secret Wars? Secret Wars. And Doom has a deep, deep history with Secret Wars, including the fact that when he stole the Beyonder's powers during Secret Wars. And so, actually, while this may have been planned for Kang, Doom might actually be the perfect bridge to get to this film. And I also think that while we're not really going to discuss the X stuff much yet, because we have a Deadpool spoiler discussion where we will discuss, I think, where the X-Men might be going, there were hints dropped throughout this phase already. And one of the main ones is the Convergence storyline. And I believe it was mentioned by the Illuminati. And the Convergence, for any of you that don't know, was a storyline from the Avengers Illuminati. And the Illuminati were a group of heroes that had basically taken it upon themselves to make decisions for everyone because they felt they knew better. I guess that's the easiest way. And it was Reed Richards, Black Panther, Namor, Professor Xavier, Iron Man, Black Bolt. I think that's all of them. And so these guys basically, and they discover that universes are converging. And that when the universes converge, only one universe survives and the other one dies out. There is a thing that they can converge, but things can be wiped out from parts of one universe and the other, and people don't obviously some people don't choose that, because what if, your loved ones are the ones that get wiped out? So they fight kind of for their universe. And they've actually said the word convergence. And I think that this is actually where the MCU is going. I think that this whole multiversal thing is basically ostensibly their crisis on DC's crisis on Infinite Earths. What Marvel is going to do is they're going to take all these various universes, of which they have. They still haven't technically. It's not one cohesive whole yet. And what they're going to do is that through Secret Wars, possibly through Doom, and the time variance and everything like that, we are going to end up with one cohesive universe. And if you think about it, while they've hinted at mutants in the MCU, obviously the X-Men aren't in the MCU. There are no other mutants. And the X-Men wouldn't really work if you just introduced them. Like if you just did a movie and like, oh, we found mutants and, oh, here's the first class of the X-Men and whatnot. It doesn't really quite work. I guess you could do it, but it doesn't work. The X-Men work best that they've been around for a bit of time. And it's the reason why people dislike mutants, hate them, and why they see them different than heroes, for example, that might have abilities. Wolverine, for example, the entire character's hook is that he's been around forever and that he knows everybody and that he fought with Captain America in World War II. They had encountered one another and he had lived through sort of a lot of the history of the Marvel Universe. And Apocalypse being around for centuries, millennia, and whatnot. It's what works for the mutants, and I think there's a very big reason why they haven't been introduced. And I think that there is this convergence, this crisis on Infinite Earths, this thing that's coming that is going to basically reboot the Marvel Universe. I think it should have happened with Endgame. They should have rebooted right there, but obviously, well, not obviously, but I think that this is the plan now. They're showing all these multiversal variants, cool, whatever, just so they can end it and therefore make one cohesive universe that would then have the X-Men, and in this rebooted universe, the X-Men have always been there and whatnot. And I think that that's where we're going, if that makes any sense. It did in my head. Anyway, the other thing is that it's a chance to course correct. Whichever way Marvel chooses to go, it wasn't working. They messed up. That's all there is to it. And this is a chance for them to correct that course. And I think they've chosen a decent way to go about it. I don't know if it's the best. I have to give it some thought to be like, what would I have done? Geeks we always do that. And I don't know if it's what I would have done, but it's a good way. It really is. And I think most of us should give it a chance. Let's see where it goes. RDJ coming back, being able to play a villain. I mean, that's the other thing. It gives you something familiar. It's Robert Downey Jr., but now he's the villain. He's playing Victor Von Doom. And there's some interest in that. There's something interesting, something cool that he might be able to bring to the character, to the role. He is a good actor. And so, I think that it's something to look forward to. And certainly way more. I definitely have way more hope as to where this is going, simply because of this pivot. Because two reasons. One is, it's cool because this is what comics does. It's kind of that shock, that weird thing that happens and like, oh my God, wow, I never expected that to happen, for one. And second, because it brings up that nostalgic feel too, which is nice when it comes to Robert Downey Jr., the callback to all the Avengers stuff. But now he's different in this universe. And I think that that's just a really, really interesting thing. And I look forward to see where this is going. And remember, you heard it here first. This is Marvel's Crisis on Infinite Earths. So I think we've gone on for way too long. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I hope to see you in the comments. Hit us up. Come see us on Facebook. Leave us a comment down below. Good night.